The COVID overflow tends start going up again at hospitals in Texas. The big infrastructure bill could pass the Senate today. And it's not just you. It does seem like everyone's been driving like a lunatic lately. Tuesday Need to Know. Let's go. Good morning. This is Cheddar's Need to Know podcast for Tuesday, August 10th. I am Jill Wagner with Carlo Versano. Hi, Carlo.
Good morning, my friend. So, last night, the last sunset after 8 p.m. here in the Northeast until next May. Hard to believe.
I did know that because I saw a ton of people posting it. It's just also getting darker. It's staying darker so much later in the morning. Yeah. My whole drive to work is in the dark now.
I felt a little chill. I felt a little chill in the air yesterday morning. I'm ready for my shorts and hoodie season to start early this year.
Yes, your favorite time. What is it? You get like 3 weeks from September to October.
Exactly.
All right, let's get to some news here. Governor Greg Abbott is appealing to out-of-state medical help to deal with Texas's surge in COVID cases fueled by the Delta variant. One hospital in Houston now has put up tents to accommodate an anticipated overflow of patients. It's like kind of like the bad old days of last year. Meanwhile, the Houston and Dallas school districts have imposed mask mandates for students and staff, defying Abbott's orders. Also worth noting, the Pentagon plans to make COVID vaccines mandatory for all active duty troops by the middle of next month, or even earlier if cases continue to rise or final FDA approval comes. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin saying that vaccines are necessary to maintain military readiness.
I noticed in Brooklyn yesterday more businesses back to mandating masks, especially sort of local shops, coffee shops, my bagel place, for instance, which is almost worse, honestly, than when it was just a government mandate, because first of all, I feel like I'm losing a lot more masks now because it's like I never know when I'm going to need it. I don't really go out with one on, but I keep it in my pocket or attached to my arm, and then I eventually lose it. But I guess that's just sort of how it's going to be from here on out, right?
I guess so. It is a rough life for you, Carlo, out there in the East End. You have our sympathies.
You tease. Okay, all right.
Look, I think more masks I see nobody in masks still. I mean,
really?
Yeah, I don't see anybody wearing masks in the city.
It's definitely
in places where they're supposed to be wearing masks. When I park my car, it's probably like one of the more dangerous, my most at-risk moments in my day, because especially when I go get my car in the afternoon, because the lot is usually filled with people, none of whom are wearing masks.
And there's no ventilation in those parking lots.
It's disgusting. Yeah. They're like that air has been down there since 2000. In Washington, the Senate is scheduled to hold a final vote this morning on the $1 trillion infrastructure bill. That legislation has maintained its bipartisan momentum, and it appears to me to be more than likely to get the 60-plus votes needed to overcome the filibuster. So Senate Dems also released a $3.5 trillion budget proposal that they hope to pass without Republican support as a complementary bill that focuses on soft or human infrastructure spending, on social programs, and climate efforts. So can you just talk about, Carlo, a little bit about so Democrats are basically holding the bipartisan bill until that other bill is done, the bigger bill, and then they're going to try and pass them together. It's
in the House.
Yes, it's really this complicated thing. I don't know.
What's going on? I don't really get it either. Because I don't understand. Is Nancy Pelosi really going to hold up that infrastructure bill if this other one doesn't come through? It seems hard to imagine that she would, but I don't know. I mean, she plays 3D chess, so maybe she's got a trick up her sleeve. Because the $3.5 trillion budget bill is a much harder pill to swallow, just in terms of they don't necessarily have the votes for that. They would need every single Democrat to pass it, whereas the infrastructure bill, the votes are there. It's going to pass. But should the two pass together, basically all of President Biden's economic agenda would be secured, which is pretty remarkable when you think about it. And the infrastructure bill itself is really remarkable for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, we have not seen this level of bipartisan support for a major piece of legislation since I was trying to remember this morning, maybe the Bush administration. Maybe. I don't even know then. The second reason why it's remarkable, former President Trump has been threatening to withhold endorsements from any Republican who has signed on to this bill, and that appeared to do nothing. So I don't know if the Republicans in Congress are trying to sort of slow walk away from him a little bit, or maybe they just see that this bill is better for their constituents than them holding it hostage, but it's definitely worth noting. And third, and the most important reason, this bill is really effectively a recognition from both parties that climate change is an existential threat that's going to require a boatload of new spending. There's billions of dollars in this bill for flood resilience, wildfire mitigation, ways to develop new sources of drinking water for places that are plagued by the drought in the West. I don't think it's enough, but it's remarkable just in terms of, think about it, right? The official Republican line when it comes to climate change until recently was that it was either no big deal, not really something to worry about, or straight up fake. I mean, the former president said it was a Chinese hoax. So the fact that I think both parties, at least if not in words, but at least in actions, are saying, okay, climate is something that we have to deal with, that's progress, and it's notable.
I'm curious to see what happens to this $3.5 trillion bill, because as we were mentioning, that's going to be the tougher bill to pass. Even Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who are Democrats, have said they are not necessarily on board.
Right.
And one other piece of economic news that I just wanted to mention, it came out yesterday. Job openings in this country have hit a record high, 10.1 million. So there are 10.1 million job openings in June. This is as of June. For some reason, this is a number that lags a couple months. And it comes as these businesses and companies struggle to attract new employees. There's just this continuing shortage of workers. So currently in this country, there are more job openings than workers who are even looking for jobs. I don't know how we got into this position. There's a lot of theories. I mention it just because one of the arguments in passing a bill, passing the infrastructure bill, is the job creation. But is that the problem that we're like? I don't think that's a problem in this country anymore.
No, I don't really think so either. Is that really? I mean, I think the bigger reason.
At least that's what Biden. I heard Biden talk. Like that's how Biden's framing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know about that. I mean, I think that I think we're going to start to see the job situation improve next month because the extra UI is coming to an end. I think right after Labor Day. I mean, I have a friend, for instance, who's been sort of on the sidelines of the labor market, sort of living off of Uncle Joe Biden bucks, as he calls them, and he's now like actively looking for work again. I don't know. I mean, that's just sort of anecdotal, but I think that as those benefits start to run out in the next couple of weeks, we're going to see a surge, I think, into the labor market.
Let's talk about some of the governors in this country facing various threats to their jobs, starting with our own here in New York. The legislative committee in charge of deciding whether to impeach New York Governor Andrew Cuomo expects to finish reviewing evidence of these sexual harassment allegations against him within weeks, as Cuomo shows no signs of stepping down on his own, even as more of his top aides continue to resign.
Cuomo's, of course, not the only one-time Democratic star governor who people were talking about as a potential presidential contender this time last year who's now in danger of losing his job. But we're talking, of course, about Gavin Newsom in California. He may be at greater risk of getting recalled than I think anybody thought here. Counties in California are going to start sending out ballots to registered voters next week ahead of that September 14th special election. The latest polls show that a majority of California voters oppose this recall effort. But this is a big but. Those who do support it are much more enthusiastic about getting rid of Newsom. That suggests that his fate really could come down to turnout, of course, right? How many Democrats show up in an off-year special election. The problem or the advantage, depending on how you look at it with these special elections, is that they favor the most passionate voters, right? In this case, those voters are those who want Newsom out. The same thing happened with Gray Davis back in the early 2000s when Schwarzenegger beat him in the recall.
I don't know, why does California do so many recalls? And isn't it just one of those things like if your elected official is not great, you just wait until they're up for re-election. And these terms aren't that long.
I know. It's crazy. California has the craziest sort of legislation and just like political system. I mean, the different propositions, the recalls, it's nuts. I don't know why they don't fix it.
And it isn't just Democratic governors, by the way, that are in a bit of trouble either. Down in Florida, Ron DeSantis has seen his approval rating slump as the latest COVID wave pummels his state. DeSantis, who is being viewed by some as a kind of heir apparent to Trumpism, is now underwater among Florida voters, according to a new poll. Another recent poll had him trailing Democrat Charlie Crist in a hypothetical 2022 matchup. DeSantis' opposition to mask mandates at schools is among the reasons that his numbers have slipped over the summer.
Did you see?
Interesting that his numbers are going down.
Well, did you see yesterday that he came out and said that he will withhold the salaries of school officials that put mask mandates in place? Truly, truly idiotic. I mean, I don't even know what to think about that.
I saw this tweet from Andy Slavitt, who I've quoted before. He used to run the Biden administration vaccine rollout. He said, Ron DeSantis is the first human I've ever seen not fazed that pediatric hospitals are filling up on his watch. I think that that's going to be the challenge for a lot of these governors who haven't taken this seriously, is that kids are now being impacted.
That's a good point.
Like, we don't societally value older Americans the way that a lot of other cultures do.
Sure.
But when kids start to fill up the hospitals, which they are, and we're hearing about as well, a lot of kids with long haul COVID symptoms. That is not something, even kids who had really mild symptoms are now coming down with long-term COVID symptoms, like not being able to concentrate, shortness of breath. There's this great profile in the New York Times where they talked to a bunch of kids who said they used to be great students and just they can't, they simply cannot concentrate anymore. I don't know. Why you wouldn't do everything to protect kids is beyond me. I mean, even if you actually don't care about kids and you just politically want to, you want to save yourself politically. I don't know. It's not a good situation now with this Delta variant, which is, for whatever reason, seeming to impact kids more.
Yeah, now you're seeing that reflected, I think, in DeSantis' numbers.
Gas prices continue their upward climb, with the national average now $1 higher than it was this time last year at $3.19 a gallon. The peak could be coming, though. Crude oil prices have been on decline as the accelerating Delta wave and the new virus restrictions in China have set back the outlook for fuel demand. Crude oil had its worst week since October last week. The fact that a growing number of companies are now pushing back their return to office plans is putting downward pressure on energy prices and related stocks, which are among the market's worst performers yesterday.
Franny told me last night to short Texas crude because another lockdown's coming.
She's wise beyond her years, Carlo.
She's like my personal Jim Cramer. No, quick. She does this little thing now where she's like cooing. So she just sits there and she goes, "Agoog, agoog, agoog," and I'm like, "Are you telling me to buy Google? Is that what you're saying, Franny the stock picker?" I would be a buyer of all those stay-at-home stocks. It seems like that's where we're headed, doesn't it? Doesn't it? I mean, maybe not a lockdown per se, especially not here in the Northeast where things are relatively good still, but something resembling sort of the hell of 2020 this fall and winter. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. I hope to God I'm wrong, because honestly, I don't think I could take it. I really don't.
Look, I'm helping my daughter's school try to formulate a little bit of the COVID plan, and it's just we kind of got through the last year, and we relatively unscathed, at least in terms of her school. And the impact on the kids. Obviously, there were some shutdowns here and there and a couple of weeks of quarantine. But it's just incredible that we're now on a second full school year. I mean, it started, this is now impacting 3 school years, if you remember, which is wild.
It just goes to your point yesterday that after a while, it's no longer a sort of like, it's no longer a weird thing. It's just life.
This is how we are.
Right?
Yes.
This is it. Right.
My daughter, it's been challenging to get her to wear a mask because she's not even 3. I mean, and when she does wear a mask, it's certainly not on properly. It's like down on her chin usually. But even she said to me the other day, because we had to do this allergy stuff, and she's like, "Are there people going to be there?" And I'm like, "Yeah, there's going to be people there." And so she went and grabbed her mask, and I'm like, God. I can't believe it. I was so proud of her. But this is, I think it's strange. My husband had a couple friends over the weekend, and there were 2 kids, and I was just chatting with them, and like one of them kind of was like, "Yeah, I like home. I didn't mind that much being, at home for school." And that's just crazy. Could you imagine that we would have done that, right? Like, could you imagine us thinking you were gonna, I remember if you missed a week, you were like, what did I miss? Everybody, you know, like all my friends moved on without me, blah, blah, blah. Like I didn't even want to go on vacation early or whatever.
I used to have the worst FOMO in school for that exact reason,
Okay, Elon Musk's SpaceX is teaming up with a Canadian tech startup to launch a satellite into space that would display ads, logos, and artwork on a giant digital screen as it orbits Earth. You wouldn't be able to see the screen from down here, but a selfie stick attached to the satellite would broadcast the display to a YouTube live stream. Anyone could advertise on the CubeSat through crypto payments, and the plan is to have the space billboard in orbit next year. How, like, where, this is, I think, just speaks to that we're in a very troubling place as humanity right now.
Jill, you ever look up at the night sky and marvel at the wonder of it all, how we're just floating through space on this rock, and you see the stars and think about how insignificant you are, and you think to yourself, I wish there were more ads out there. Right?
All the time, Carlo, is what I'm thinking. Jeopardy executive producer Mike Richards has confirmed that he is in the running to succeed Alex Trebek, while also pushing back against claims that he mistreated past colleagues when he ran The Price is Right. Several workplace discrimination suits were filed by models on that game who said that they were wrongfully terminated when they became pregnant during Richards' tenure as EP. Richards says those suits were against the show, not him, and do not reflect, quote, who I am.
I'm convinced this guy's goose was cooked as soon as that first story leaked last week about him being the front runner. I just think it was like a classic trial balloon. Send it up there, see what happens, and people came out of the woodwork, and sure enough, they're going to give it to somebody else. Mark my words. That's my that's my prediction for the week.
I listened to the podcast where you and Baker were chatting about it, and Baker is a huge Jeopardy fan, and he
I didn't know that about him
almost every night. It's one of like the more surprising things.
He's an odd duck.
An odd duck, that Baker Machado. Anyway, but I thought what his point was interesting. I was surprised that he liked Richards as a pick, just because he's relatively not known really to most people. I don't know if you're a big fan of Jeopardy, maybe you know who he is. But I did agree with what he said, where it is good to just have a steady presence. As much as we're enjoying the guest hosts, they kind of just need to pick someone, right? I mean, it's been a while.
He was making the point, I think, that like shows like Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, it's such like comfort viewing that, you know, you put it on when you're like making dinner or whatever. You don't necessarily, you just want the comfort of the show, which is why Trebek was as amazing as he was, right? He was like, he had that amazing sort of like grandfatherly presence to him, and I think that's a good point, and maybe this guy is the guy to do it. We'll see, I guess.
And look, and I do not know anything about these lawsuits, and I'm certainly not defending the action of Price is Right, but I do think we sometimes need to look at things in the context of when they happened, and the view towards pregnancy and pregnant women, it just was different many years ago, and things are still changing as we right now. Things are still changing, and I say this as somebody who recently had a baby and really struggled after I had my baby and found it really difficult to go back to work. I mean, I'm not like a woman hater here, but sometimes you do, as you hear these stories, and it happens all the time. I mean, we've talked about this, like there are movies that were made even 10, 15 years ago that wouldn't fly right now, that just wouldn't get made. Should they get canceled? Should they, no, I mean, sometimes you have to just think about things in the context and the time period in which they happened.
I completely agree with you. And also, the other thing is just always take lawsuits with a grain of salt, right? Just because somebody filed a lawsuit on a show doesn't really mean anything. People file lawsuits against companies all the time. And I'm not saying that these women who filed lawsuits when they were on The Price is Right were right or wrong. I don't know enough to know that. I'm just saying, like, when you hear about, oh, well, he was the subject of a lawsuit in his former job. Like, well, a lot of people were, frankly.
And finally, does it seem to anyone else like everyone has been driving like a bat out of hell lately? Yes, there is now data to confirm that people have been driving like maniacs ever since the start of the pandemic. The number of highway deaths in 2020 was the highest since 2007, according to the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, even though overall miles driven were down significantly. Basically, there were fewer people driving, but the ones that were thought that they were in the Fast and the Furious movies. The traffic data suggesting that the higher death toll was related to higher average speeds combined with an uptick in DUIs and scaled back police enforcement. Officers around the country say that the speeding has only gotten worse this summer, which is the most dangerous time of year on the roads to begin with.
I've been saying this for months now. It's that people have completely lost their minds out there. Speeding is one of those things, Jill. I'm sure you'll agree that like it totally changes once you have a baby. Like I used to drive like an absolute idiot when I was a kid, or when I was like in my 20s even. Now I'm the guy yelling slow down at people if I'm like walking on the sidewalk and someone's gunning it down the street when I have the baby with me. But actually, you know what? Speeding isn't the thing that annoys me the worst. The thing that I hate more than anything is the guys who, and it's always guys, it's never women, who drive around without their mufflers on. And I don't know if this is just a New York City thing or a Brooklyn thing even, but it is insane in New York right now. I say no joke, 1 out of 10 cars on the streets of Brooklyn is driving around without a muffler, and they're not getting ticketed. The cops don't do anything. I've never seen a cop pull over one of those cars, and I think it's illegal. I don't get it.
You know, we could do a love-hate about driving, and we probably should actually, because I hate the cars who try to go super fast and like weave in and out, like they think that they're playing Tetris or a video game. It is so dangerous. And I completely agree with you. Everything changes when you have a kid. All of a sudden, you view cars as weapons and not just as something to get from point A to point B. To the point where on my block, if you could believe it, my street is off another street that's kind of this like straight, flat road. So people, and it's residential, but people go down this road. I'm not joking, 80 miles an hour. And I'm a big runner, so my husband's always walking the dog. I'm a big runner. And I'm like, this is insanity. Yeah. I actually saw someone testing out a car on the road the other day. And my husband petitioned the village, and he got a sign that said, "Slow down, kids are playing."
Oh, nice. Good for him.
And then, unfortunately, they put it on our block where there's not really a speeding issue because we're the side street. But we're trying. We're trying to maybe get them to put a speed bump or something because it's really quite dangerous. And yeah, I mean, in general, as you say, though, people are driving like lunatics.
My mom, briefly when we were kids, people used to make fun of me at school because she would sit outside on our curb and yell at cars as they sped past because we lived near the school. I was like, Mom, this is so embarrassing. But honestly, now I'm like, I totally see what you were saying. I totally get it. She was right, as she always is.
All right. That is what you need to know for Tuesday, August 10th.
All right, guys, be safe out there on the roads.